We had a meeting yesterday with President Macron and Foreign Minister Barrot with a group of civil society leaders, as well as a father of a hostage in Gaza and a doctor who'd been working in hospitals inside Gaza. And we shared some polling in that meeting that showed that more than 70% of both Israelis and Palestinians and Americans support a two-state solution package or can accept one based on regional normalization, not the displacement of people, but instead really building a Palestinian state that can be integrated into the region. And in that poll, and I think this was particularly noteworthy for some of our French colleagues, only 14% of MAGA voters supported steps such as the annexation of the West Bank. And actually, a majority of them supported President Trump engaging with the Saudi-French initiative and actually providing US leadership in a multilateral vision that could deliver that state. So I hope that when President Trump considers these different competing visions, he also sees that under his feet, the consensus in the United States, which I think is the one that he cares about the most, there is far more support for him taking a position towards a two-state solution and regional normalization than these very disturbing ideas about displacement or annexation. And we have seen in the last few weeks, particularly since the murder of Charlie Kirk, a vociferous debate inside the Republican Party, inside the base, around what the administration's position should be towards Israel-Palestine, as well as some reports of competing figures within the administration with different visions. All of that, I think, is feeding into a pretty high-stakes decision that I do anticipate we're going to get a better sense of next week. And as I said, it's either this dystopian continuation of the war, displacement of people, the kind of idea of the Gaza Riviera we heard about back in February, which is quite nightmarish, or this much more positive vision. And it's interesting, in that same poll, Francois, we found young Israelis who had been moving to the right over the last 15 years pretty consistently. They were the biggest swing back in support of a regional deal and a Palestinian state. The people who are within Israeli society have been paying the largest price. Obviously, Gazan Palestinians have been paying a much larger price, but the people serving reserve duty, who've been, at the front lines in the Israeli army over the last 2 years, whose families and businesses are collapsing, they don't want this future of endless war. We know that a vast majority of Israelis believe this war is now being fought for political reasons, not for security reasons. And so all of those pressure points and this swing to really look for a more positive vision that diplomacy rather than further violence can deliver, that should be brought to bear, hopefully, when President Trump comes to a decision, as well as the Gulf voices.
And how did President Macron react to those findings in the meeting? How did he seem?
It was funny. It was the first meeting he did after landing in JFK, before going to the United Nations and delivering the speech you showed in the package earlier. He was very supportive of the voices from civil society that we were hearing, very much on his brief. I can tell you from briefing politicians and ministers and heads of government, he really knows this issue back to front. I think he's dedicated a lot of the last few months to this being his chief foreign policy priority, and he said that I am with you to civil society leaders, to Israelis and Palestinians. He did also stake out, I think, how significant a threat there is. Like I said, that we could move towards this vision that he and the Saudi Arabian leader have sketched out, or towards something much darker. And he also said something very important, I think, that what was happening in the United Nations, as important as it wasn't sufficient. This was the diplomatic horizon, which is very important. But what we also need is a ground game for diplomacy to have a sort of attraction amongst Israelis and Palestinians in Arabic and Hebrew, being led by civil society. He convened many of these same leaders in Paris on June 13th for a conference of hundreds of civil society leaders to generate ideas that fed into the New York Declaration. And yesterday was a chance to hear those ideas in real time and then integrate them into the speech that he gave yesterday and the path forward. So I would say determined, but also quite clear-eyed about just how high stakes a moment this is.